Man, I've had a lot of impromptu conversations. I mean, for this week, I've had two. Not, yeah, they just, this one came up a little bit. I had a little more notice because I think, what did we say, like 2 hours ago? We're going to
Yeah.
record today. And we were
Yep.
messaging each other. I wasn't even home. And I'm glad we were able to make this happen as quickly as we did. But it all started with this morning. I saw an exchange between you and Simon Dixon. And I've never met Simon Dixon before. I'd love to have him on my show. But I saw an exchange where he was, and you correct me here if I'm paraphrasing here, but fill in the gaps if I get it wrong. But he was saying, I'd love to, have a moderator and debate you. And I said, I'd love to. I volunteer my services to be the moderator. I think I'm a fair guy, and let both you guys speak and yeah, I'd love to be the one to do that. So that's how this all materialized.
I don't even know what the debate is about or what the moderation is about. So to be honest, so what's happened is people started tagging me on his stuff weeks ago. There have been people that have been asking him to have me on the show or to talk about these things for weeks. And I don't even know what it is that we would be talking about, to be honest. But I know that he didn't decide that he wanted to talk about it until I was actually getting traction. And, so for the several weeks that people have been suggesting this, he's ignored it. Then all of a sudden, Bitcoin drops and people are starting to listen to an alternative story. And now it's, if you don't do this right now. Well, I mean, I have no responsibility to help Bitcoin maxis defend their position. Yeah, and I will say, even related to this, for years, what my experience has been with Bitcoin maxis is I've been completely censored. Whether it's Michael Saylor or whether it's Max Kaiser or Adam Back or other Bitcoin core developers or the guy who wrote the Bitcoin standard, they've all blocked me. No debate. No one wants to talk about it. Frankly, as all of this, conversation is being resurfaced and people are starting to look at Bitcoin and whether it was hijacked, the person who should be talking about this is Roger Ver, and he can't because his agreement with the government, basically, he has to walk on eggshells for 3 years, and that's just a statement of how suppressed any position that isn't Bitcoin maxi has been. Well, so here's the thing. I have tons of interviews lined up. I have another huge article coming out on Brownstone. And what I've been trying to do is educate people about the risks of CBDCs, or now backdoor CBDCs, through stablecoin legislation. And worse than that, the Clarity Act and the tokenization of everything else that you own. That has been the whole thing that I've been talking about for 3.5 years. The hijacking of Bitcoin fits into it somewhat, but it's not even like, this isn't even the main thrust of what I'm trying to warn people about. It just so happens that I reported and I put in my book over 3 years ago.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and bam, I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. I can also take delivery at any time, extremely simple and less expensive than any other method. The do-it-yourself way to buy precious metals. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. I mean, look at how easy this is. The Vaulted app on my phone, I can access it at any time.
I put in my book that it looks like Epstein was involved potentially with the hijacking of Bitcoin and also funding all 3 US CBDC pilots. I was one of the first people to talk about that. I've written other articles about it. And here's the way this was treated. People in the Bitcoin community said that's a conspiracy theory. And even the way that I laid it out, I said, listen, we don't know for sure, but we know this. We know Epstein funded this MIT multimedia group. We know this MIT multimedia group invested in a variety of things. This is one of those things. Well, what has come out of these emails, not even just this last batch, in the House version from late last year, there was an email, and now there's just an avalanche of emails that show that Jeffrey Epstein invested in Blockstream, which is a company that profits off of Bitcoin being basically hobbled because they sell what are called second layer solutions. He invested in that through this guy, Joy Ito. And then he funded Bitcoin Core developers directly. There's an email between him and Joy Ito, who was running the MIT group. So he literally is right at the center of it, profiting off of the whole thing. Well, now the Bitcoin maxis are saying, well, that's old news. So they went from this is a conspiracy theory to when it's blatant, well, that's old news, to then I've got other Bitcoin maxis DMing me saying, oh, well, you should look at Reid Hoffman. It's not Reid Hoffman, it's Brock Pierce. Brock Pierce is somebody who has been advising Epstein on crypto matters since 2011. And it just so turns out he was the chair of the Bitcoin Foundation when it collapsed. And so when it collapsed and MIT took over the development funded by Epstein, well, Brock Pierce is actually advising Epstein. So how do we think all of that came together? Well, we now know how all that came together. And it involves Tether and all of these other things. And so this is my position on this, which is that it's now not even it's irrefutable what happened. And people are now doing damage control, trying to say, well, it doesn't mean anything. And they're trying to make all kinds of other analogies that it would be like, well, Jeffrey Epstein uses cash, other people use cash. It doesn't mean that cash itself is bad. Trying to make all of these other analogies. And it's like, it's not about whether Jeffrey Epstein used Bitcoin. He funded a company that profits off of Bitcoin being hobbled, and then he funded the core developers that hobbled it. And then he funded CBDC pilots. I mean, that's not the same as he used it like everybody else. It's materially different than that.
So my first question is then, what is, so you're not sure what this debate, Simon Dixon, what are your guesses of what the topic is that he wants to talk to you about? Because he said something along the lines of you're missing key points.
Well, I used to watch Simon Dixon a decade ago or so. I remember when he was kind of early on the scene, and I stopped watching him when he got involved in Celsius and some other crypto stuff. So I haven't paid attention to him for a while, but what I know from what's been documented is he's a Bitcoin maxi. So he's probably doing what other Bitcoin maxis are doing, which is immediate damage control to try to continue to prop up the narrative. I mean, he was involved in Bitcoin early, and so at this point, everybody that's a Bitcoin maxi.
Aaron, what's a Bitcoin maxi for people that don't know what that is? What's a Bitcoin maxi?
Bitcoin maxi is someone who thinks that Bitcoin is the only crypto. All other cryptos are shit coins, and that basically Bitcoin is going to save the world and basically be the future of sound money. And it's to the exclusion of everything else. So they're a maximalist. That's what the maxi represents. And so, my guess is that he's, like others, trying to now people are making absurd assertions. I don't even know if I seriously doubt he's read all of my work. I doubt he's read my book. I doubt he's watched my 200 hours of podcasts on this. I doubt he's read my articles or participated in any of the speeches that I've given on this topic. He might be reacting to the fact that there are people making claims like, Epstein is Satoshi and all of that. I'm not making any of those points. Those are not the points that I've made. But in the end, he's still a Bitcoin maxi, and he doesn't like the fact that the price is collapsing. And one of the things that I've put together in my analysis of this is it's not even just about Bitcoin, it's also about Tether. And, not to get into all of the real minutiae on this, but essentially in 2017, the story changed. Prior to 2017, Bitcoin was a currency that you would use to buy and sell things. It was essentially initially something that would be an alternative to the dollar that would enable trade all over the world. That was the original story. And then all of a sudden it shifted in 2017. And people started saying, oh no, it's digital gold. It's a store of value. I actually did an interview with Jeffrey Tucker a couple of days ago, and Jeffrey was involved in this very early. He wrote a book early on, and as an economist, as a well-known economist, he kind of framed why Bitcoin was a fabulous invention in terms of it, because it was being used as a medium of exchange, and it was something that could get rid of central banks, and it had a limited supply and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden in 2017, people were even kind of saying to him, people who apparently not read the white paper, like, no, you're wrong. We're talking about digital gold now. All of a sudden there's this big narrative shift. So there's this block size war. The devs are funded, with money from Epstein and so forth to cement these changes. Lightning Network was going to be the second layer solution, and they froze the base layer of Bitcoin at 7 transactions per second. But the interesting thing is, if in order for something to be a store of value, it actually has to hold its value or go up in value. Well, the University of Texas did a study in 2017 that actually found that when there was a dip in price, Tether were automatically being kind of printed and buying up Bitcoin to prop up the price. And their analysis shows that at least 50% of the price appreciation of Bitcoin during 2017 was due to this Tether printing. Well, it turns out Tether, the co-founder of Tether, is this same Brock Pierce who was advising Epstein on crypto. He's the same Brock Pierce who was the co-founder of Tether. So they basically made this store of value narrative and then printed Tether, which appears to be out of thin air, because Tether has never completed an audit. And during this same time period, they were found by the CFTC to only have about 27% of the assets backing the coin. So in other words, they were printing, probably 3/4 of it completely out of the air, using it to pump the price. And that's what led people to believe that it was a store of value. So the whole original premise and the reason that people thought it was such a great store of value was largely fake. So that's pretty big, because you now have a whole bunch of people that after 2017 that have been introduced to Bitcoin, and the only thing that they've heard of is it's digital gold. They've never even they've never read the white paper. They've never heard about or that it was used to buy tickets through Expedia. You could use it at Microsoft. You could use it at overstock.com to buy furniture. This Bitcoin up until 2017 was being used as a currency. Most people that I've talked to, as I've done travel and workshops and so forth, most people don't know any of that history. They only know of this hijacked version of its digital gold. And so now a couple of things are happening. I know you've had Dave on several times as well. So if the idea is this is digital gold and it's better than gold and it's better than silver for all of these reasons that they like to describe and all of this, the marketing messages around that. Well, if you look at the track record for the last 3-4 years, turns out gold and silver have been a better store of value. So even before this big price drop the last few days, or rebounded a little bit today, people were starting to say, hey, maybe this isn't a store of value because it's not doing as well as gold and silver. It's done much worse in the last few years than gold and silver. So that's actually cast some doubt on the whole reimagined version of Bitcoin as digital gold. And then the Epstein stuff comes out, and what's happening is people are now looking at this and saying, hey, wait, maybe this digital gold narrative is fake. And maybe Epstein was involved in helping to push this narrative around. That's not good. People don't want to be. I'm in a group right now where people don't want to be associated with it. They're now disgusted with it, and people are bailing on Bitcoin because they don't want to participate in something that is furthering a narrative that Epstein was funding and that Epstein benefited from. And I think Simon wants to stop that bleeding. And because let's face it, if it turns out this thing was fake and this thing was all made up. And Bitcoin, I won't drop to zero, but Bitcoin, kind of goes away, or it certainly is no longer going to be the global reserve currency, and it's no longer going to be the store of value for everything. The reputations of the people that continue to promote it, despite the information that's coming out from Epstein, their reputations are, I think, irretrievably harmed.
Yeah.
So that's why.
I had Kevin Wadsworth on yesterday from North Star and Bad Charts, and we were talking about Bitcoin, and he was doing his analysis of where it's at now and how the maxis are out there saying it's going to go to, I don't know what they say, 200,000 at some point this year or something. So something
Max Kaiser's been saying it's going to go to 200,000 every year since at least 2019. This guy Tommy Lee is another one of these guys. One of the things I want to do, I want to take all the transcripts from everybody that's ever been on CNBC, and I want to timestamp their dates and timestamp their price predictions, and then look back at the real values, and then publish that report.
I I I I said to Kevin yesterday. I go, what are these Bitcoin conferences going to be like here in the next 3 to 6 months? Like, how are you going to spin this? Like,
Admittedly, people get a little upset with me because I put pictures of Jonestown and all the dead bodies, or I or I put a picture of Reverend Jones and I said new keynote speaker announced for 2026 Bitcoin conference. And so, but look, again, part of the problem with this is I was involved in Bitcoin early, and I went to Bitcoin conferences, early on, and people were talking about defeating the banks, and even Simon was talking about defeating the banks when I listened to him all back in the day. That was his whole thing as well. And now you go to these Bitcoin conferences, it's like, gee, I hope Saylor's company strategy gets listed on the S&P so that, more people are buying it through funds. It has nothing to do with economic freedom. It has nothing to do with defeating the banks. I mean, it's actually become kind of a joke. And even people that still remain Bitcoin maxis, but that were there early on, that have been going to these conferences the last couple of years, are like, yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't recognize this. There's no freedom element to this. So, I mean, look, I appreciate that Simon is in the position that he's in, because, he's kind of, this is really bad for him. If this breaks badly, then the entire reputation he has built for the last 16 years evaporates. So that's why he wants to talk to me now. He didn't want to talk to me a month ago. He didn't want to talk to me 2 months ago. The same guy that's been requesting that we talk has been doing this for weeks, if not months. And he only responded now. This is why I'm not going to be pushed to, my reason for being is not to help Bitcoin maxis repair their reputations. So I'll talk to him, but I'm not going to talk to him until after March. And I'll tell you why. Because the alternative view to the digital gold Michael Saylor view has been completely suppressed for 9 years. And some of the people that would be the leading people talking about it, have even been threatened with life in prison and have been gagged to talk about this. So what I know is that the majority of the world has never heard the alternative side. So I would like to present the alternative view of what's going on. And it's not even just about rehashing what went on in 2017. In fact, that's almost none of what I talk about. What I talk about is the threat of CBDCs, the threat of stable coins, and the fact that to defeat technocracy, we need privacy. Technocracy is all about surveillance and centralized control. The antidote to that is privacy. So my reason that I'm not excited about Bitcoin, he may have facts about the history of what happened here or there. It doesn't change the fact that Bitcoin is not an alternative to the surveillance state, because Bitcoin itself is trackable, which is how the United States government has 325,000 Bitcoin. People like to make this claim it's censorship resistant, not my keys, not my coins. How did the US government get 325,000 Bitcoin? They didn't mine it. There's a company called Chainalysis that's been tracking all of the transactions. They work with exchanges. They work with law enforcement. It's not even just transactions that are on exchanges. If you did a transaction with somebody and that person was busted by the government, one of the things that they do is they tell you to turn over who your counterparties are. So they find one of your transactions and now they can link all of your stuff. It's a public ledger. So from that perspective, the way I describe what Bitcoin has become is I call it non-fungible digital surveillance gold. And that's at best. That's not the alternative. That's not the antidote to CBDCs. That's not the antidote to technocracy. So that's all my point is. And so, but I need to get the message out to people, because what's more pressing than rehabbing Simon's reputation is to stop the Clarity Act, which is actively moving its way through and under a different name, the market structure bill, so on and so forth, that's going through the Senate. This is a pressing emergency. The Bitcoin stuff is actually kind of a sideshow. The regulation that's being pushed through with the Clarity Act has implications for everybody in the country, regardless of whether you have crypto, because what it's doing is it's going to, if the Genius Act is the regulating set of rules behind stablecoins, making stablecoins trackable, programmable, and censorable by the government, the Clarity Act adds that same surveillance to everything you own. So Genius adds it to how you pay, and the Clarity Act adds that level of surveillance to everything you own, your stocks, your bonds, your retirement fund, your house, your car, everything else is going to be ultimately governed under this Clarity Act. So if that happens, then this is how you end up owning nothing. So my broader message has nothing to do with Bitcoin. My broader message, which is time sensitive, has nothing to do with whatever it is that Simon's talking about. My broader message, which is time sensitive, is related to the Clarity Act. It just so happens that there is a tie-in here. There's a tie-in with what's going on with Epstein, not only related to Bitcoin, but it also relates to Tether, which is the first regulated stablecoin under the Genius Act, called USAT. This is related to this whole story. So this is how it ends up getting brought up, because people need to understand the absolute scam that is Tether. They created a stablecoin basically out of thin air, wasn't fully backed, couldn't perform an audit. Then this guy, Howard Lutnick, who's in the Epstein files, who's Epstein's next door neighbor, who bought a house next to Epstein. We talked about this last time. And I even said at the time, I don't know what all the connections are. Well, he's in the files now. We're getting a pretty big handle on this. He comes in and cuts a deal, invests $600 million in Tether before the election, and cuts an exclusive deal to manage the treasuries on behalf of Tether. Well, before the election, Tether wasn't required to back their stablecoin by treasuries. After the election, they pushed through the Genius Act requiring that all stablecoins be backed by treasuries. The single biggest beneficiary of the Genius Act is Howard Lutnick, Epstein's next door neighbor, and the first and largest outside investor in Tether, which was co-founded by Brock Epstein, who is Epstein's crypto advisor.
Say Brock Epstein?
Excuse me, Brock Pierce. Oh. Brock Pierce. Sorry, Brock Pierce. This is why all of this is important, and it's all interconnected. And frankly, it's a scandal. If you think about The Creature from Jekyll Island and that great book about that kind of the formation of the Federal Reserve, we have a situation right now where we're essentially, I call it the creature from Epstein's Island, but I mean, essentially, if you think about Tether, if you look at Tether as potentially being a backdoor CBDC, it's the backdoor CBDC, but there's one guy's company's benefiting from it all. Howard Lutnick and his firm Cantor Fitzgerald. One guy, not even a group of banks. This guy's like, no, we're going to create a new system, and I'm going to be the only one benefiting from it. Right? I mean, it's absolutely scandalous. I can't even believe. I mean, I've tried to tell. I've done articles about this. I've done interviews, and now finally, there's an opportunity for me to tell this story. So this has nothing to do with Simon, and this part of the story has nothing to do even with Bitcoin, but it is something that everybody in the country needs to understand, because it relates to literally who controls the dollars that are backing programmable digital dollars, and a similar set of laws that will be used to control every asset you own. And by the way, Lutnick's company, Cantor Fitzgerald, is getting into the digitization and tokenization of other assets as well, including our national assets. So Trump has talked about tokenizing and even selling off some of the national assets, our land, so on and so forth. Cantor Fitzgerald is positioning itself for that as well. This is the heist of the century, and it just so happens that it dovetails with the very same people that hijacked Bitcoin. That's very inconvenient for Simon. That's very inconvenient for Bitcoin maxis, but it's there, and it needs to be fully examined, fully exposed, and the people need to know what's happening here. That's what I'm doing, and that's why I have a ton of interviews coming up, and I can't say what some of them are, but they're larger interviews. They're getting me to other people that are kind of outside of the normal community, and I'm focused on that. And then I'll talk to Simon after that, because if by spring or summer, if the Clarity Act passes with no opposition, then we've kind of lost our ability to protest. I mean, once they have basically digitized everything that we own and can program it, we lose a lot of leverage. So as I've said probably every time I've been on the show, everything that I'm doing is about the fact that there's this big battle, which is technocracy versus freedom. And essentially what's at stake here is literally free will itself. So anyway, I'm going to be, a huge article coming out. I think it's 40 pages on this. And I'm going to be talking about that. I'm only going to be talking about Bitcoin because it intersects this story, but also there is a reason that I'm talking about Bitcoin, which is this. At this point, the whole premise of it is it's a store of value. It's lost almost half of its value. And this is what my concern is. Once you're an asset that's worth more than $1 trillion, in order to move the price, you actually have to have pretty significant volume. You actually have to have big players coming in and buying it. And my problem with what Bitcoin has become is at this point to pump the price, in my opinion, it can only be pumped through force and fraud. Meaning what I consider to be force would be something like a Bitcoin strategic reserve where taxpayers are forced to pay for it with their tax dollars. I consider that to be force. Fraud is, I think we're getting to the point now, and this is kind of a deeper conversation about how our financial markets work, but I will talk about it because it actually relates to the Clarity Act. We have the SEC, and the SEC is what governs securities laws. And they've developed these laws that protect the incumbents, that protect private equity, that protect the venture capital firms. And you can't invest in early stage companies. You can't invest in Amazon or Nvidia when it's, if it's like two guys in a garage, unless you make verifiably $200,000 a year or have $1 million worth of assets, not including your home, right? So the SEC keeps people out of being able to make money. It's not about protecting investors because you can buy a lottery ticket where the expected return is negative 50%. In fact, it's less than that, by the way. I will throw this in here. I don't know if you saw this. Apparently, Epstein won the lottery twice, including an $80 million lottery out in New Mexico. So, which again, clearly the lotteries are completely rigged. So whatever the expected value, the negative 50%, it's worse than that. But you're allowed to do that legally. You're allowed to take your life savings to the casino and put it on the roulette wheel or on a hand of blackjack. But you can't invest in a startup company because the government has to protect you from that. They're not protecting you. They're protecting the incumbents. So this relates to the Clarity Act, and now that's going to make that even worse. It's going to make it even more difficult for people to invest and easier to seize people's assets. And so I got a little off track. I'll wind back. There was another point I was going to make, but this is kind of what we're dealing with here.
So two questions that I have for you. One, how is it Epstein is tied into all these different things? I mean, this is unrelated to what we're talking about, but I'm going to bring it up really quick because I haven't listened to it. But apparently Brett Weinstein did a podcast with his wife talking, I don't know if you heard this, talking about his mentor, who's a professor at Harvard, who was talking about trans and email exchanges with Epstein. And it's like, I'm hearing that, and mind you, I haven't listened to it yet, so I don't know the extent of it, but just all these different things. Peter Attia's name is in these email exchanges. And now you're telling me about, it's like, how did he get involved in all this stuff?
This is the part that I didn't even want to go into, by the way. I didn't even like saying it or talking about it. And I was kind of surprised. So the question is, whose money is he investing, right? It's not his money. He was like a math professor or whatever. It's not like he had $1 billion that he started with. So it turns out, like, you can't make this up, he's managing money for the Rothschild family. There's an engagement letter where they're paying him $25 million to manage investments and to make tech investments for the Rothschild. There's an email with Epstein reaching out to Peter Thiel saying, as you know, I manage money for the Rothschild. So literally that's one group. Then there's Les Wexner, who is a billionaire who's tied into a group called Mega, which is a group of Jewish billionaires. That is another source of the money that he's investing. And it's so vast what he's involved in, because again, you're right. I've been talking about the Bitcoin angle and people were ignoring it because they don't associate him with that. That's not the realm that they think that he's in. Well, it turns out he's in everything from genetics to AI to biodigital convergence to cryptocurrencies and everything. And so, but he's the front. So the more important question is, who's he the front for? And what is their agenda? And now, once you start looking at that, now you're starting to understand what the real importance of the Epstein files are. The Epstein files aren't important because of the sex trafficking. That the Epstein files are important because whose money is he investing in, and for what reason? I mean, you see there are emails in there where he's talking about, monetizing Ukraine at the start of the conflict. There are other emails where he's making money on currency crisis before it happens, where he's placing his bets the day before the currency crisis happens. The whole world that we're living in is constructed, and I deal with this in New Hampshire. There, people who think that we have bottom-up politics and that we have a participatory democracy have no idea what they're talking about. These files prove that, and that's probably, to me, the most important thing that gets out, which is that people's understanding of how they think the world works and how power works and money works is completely false, and you can see it all over these files.
Another question that I have, why were the Bitcoin maxis calling it conspiracy at one point and now trying to move on from it as quickly as possible in relation to Epstein, in your view?
Well, because, and by the way, I'm not doing this. I have been explaining the facts about the involvement and then, what the potential implications are. Other people are going out and saying things like Epstein is Satoshi. They're starting to call Bitcoin pedo coin and everything else. And so I will tell you the reason, because I'm in groups where people are dumping their Bitcoin because they don't want to be involved with something that was potentially hijacked by Epstein. Morally, they're opposed to it. They find that what he's done is deplorable, and they almost don't even care what his motivations might have been for the hijacking of Bitcoin. They actually don't want to be associated with it. So very, very simply, if you're a Bitcoin maxi, the only thing you're holding on to now is that more people will buy. That's the only thing that will pump the price. And let me tell you what the real implications are for this. I mentioned earlier, once you have an asset that has more than $1 trillion in market cap, to move the price, you actually need some real volume, which means you need large players. Well, who is that going to be? Well, that's going to be pension funds. That's going to be governments. This is going to be large entities like this. Well, I will tell you, the volatility alone is a reason why a lot of these funds will never invest in Bitcoin, because they have risk management and they're sitting there looking at the volatility of Bitcoin and they're saying, I'm not going to invest in this now. I actually think the fact that it dropped to below 60,000, even though it's bounced back up, the volatility alone is going to be a reason that Bitcoin will be disqualified as an asset for a large number of institutional funds. So now we're at the point where, okay, well, where are we going to get the pump from? Where are we going to get people buying this? Who's going to be the one to buy it? Because it seems like it's Michael Saylor. At some point, people are going to stop letting Michael Saylor borrow money. And so where is the demand going to come from? Because I will tell you something, the demand is not coming from retail. When I do talks, and this is another point that I've tried to make, a lot of people on crypto Twitter talk about the block size wars and everything else as if it's settled science and so on and so forth. When I've talked to people around the country, nobody's ever heard of any of this. 99.99% of the people in the United States have no idea about block size wars. Nothing is settled. When you tell somebody new that's not in crypto that Epstein was involved and so on and so forth, they don't want to have anything to do with it. In fact, they're already pretty skeptical about crypto. When I talk to, and these are not stupid people. These are largely people that have woken up recently, maybe because of COVID, but they're intelligent people. A lot of them are wealthy people. Their gut is that Bitcoin is a scam. So the Bitcoin maxis have a problem. And the problem is this: people aren't using it as a currency because they destroyed the ability for that to happen by hobbling it at 7 transactions per second. So now they need people to buy digital gold. Well, the digital gold narrative is all based on confidence. Well, your confidence is going to go down if, one, it's volatile and it doesn't do well relative to gold and silver, and two, people think that it's part of a Jeffrey Epstein scheme, right? I think the damage from this Epstein thing is much larger than anyone wants to think. And so, yes, Simon's going to want to talk to me about it, and now people that have ignored me for years are in my DMs, other Bitcoin maxis. But I don't have an obligation to talk to them now after they've ignored me for years and after they've suppressed the truth on these issues for 9 years. I don't have an obligation to talk to them at all. I will talk to them. But the more important thing is to educate people about the Clarity Act, about tokenization, and about Tether, and about tokenizing commodities, and about what's going on with that bill. But, unfortunately for Bitcoin maxis, that will dovetail into their story. I didn't, that wasn't my idea. That's just where the facts have led, and it's really damning. These emails, I'm right now, I've got this site, Technocracy Atlas, and I have like 800,000 of the documents from the new thing up there.
Do you want to share any
We
of it,
don't
or
even know what
do you
all
want to
of
share it? You want to share something, or?
It's probably, you probably can't use it right now because I'm updating the thing. Okay. You can pull up the page, actually. You can pull up the page and I can actually show what's on it, and you can see the different functionality. I think the AI probably doesn't work right now because I'm updating the thing. But we've already got 26,000 photos from the previous Epstein collection in there. And people can identify who the people are. I've actually done face recognition, but then you can crowdsource that. And now I'm setting up projects. So, for instance, when a project is Epstein's involvement in crypto, because you see these things in the feed, and it's like they're different things. I didn't know any of this. Even when I wrote my article was the best I could piece together is, hey, I think he might have funded these CBDCs and Bitcoin developers, but I didn't have any other context than that. I had no idea he was involved in crypto. Actually, even before 2011, there's an email surfaced today about him setting up a meeting to meet with some people from DARPA and some cryptographers and some other people. This is 2010. He was heavily involved in this. We found out that through Brock Pierce, Jeffrey Epstein invested $3 million in Coinbase in 2014. I had no one had any idea of that. And by the way, the funny thing is, and this is something that people need to understand, Epstein's name is not listed as a shareholder. So what'll happen is somebody will come out and say, well, Jeffrey Epstein's not an investor in our company. No, he's not an investor. He's not a named investor. We have the email. He invested through a company owned by Brock Pierce. So yes, he did invest, but it shows up as Blockchain Capital or something. I can't remember what the name of it is. Just like MIT tried to suppress that he was an investor, or was a donor. In fact, they tried to cover that up, and it was exposed. Well, you have no idea that we had no idea the depth to which he's invested in a whole host of things. And again, it's other people's money through organizations, front organizations by other people. And it's the part that I'm focused on is blockchain. But the point of me building this site is for other people that have passion and interest and knowledge in these other areas to be able to crowdsource the research. So you can go through the site and like I'm setting up an email thing. There's this thing called Gmail, and I'm setting up a similar thing. So you can kind of like view Jeffrey Epstein's email box as if you were Jeffrey Epstein. Well, if you find and you sort through this thing, you're like, oh, here's an email from Brock Pierce talking about Coinbase. You can click add to project, and then that will take that piece of evidence and put it over to the project. And now people can crowdsource and search and find different pieces of information from the Epstein files, and then make annotations and then add links and add other research. So this is a way for people to crowdsource information. But I've added something else. And again, part of this is, so if you're visiting technocracyatlas.com now, understand it was working, but it's going to be going through an overhaul because 3.5 million pages is quite a bit. But I've also added all of the Pandora Papers, the Panama Papers, all of that investigative journalism that was done. I have 13.5 million financial records. So I'll tell you, I'll give you an example of when the AI was up and working. I actually typed in, tell me the relationship between Brock Pierce and Jeffrey Epstein. It actually found, I believe, in the Panama or Pandora Papers, an investment they were in together in 2005, 2006. I had no idea. No, I don't think anybody knew any of that. Like, that's the beauty of actually now having all of this data. You can search it and just ask basic questions, and you're searching data that has never been connected before. I guarantee the Pandora Papers, there's an email of Epstein saying he's worried about the Pandora Papers. So with enough time and using a lot of the technology, we're going to be able to put together network maps of relationships and people and timetables. And so I'm building this site so that other people can launch their own investigations, and we can get to the bottom of all of this. But it's going to change. I can tell you just from what's already been out there, it's going to change everybody's understanding of how the world works.
Why do you think this information is getting out now, Aaron? This is the question that I keep asking myself. And I'm a skeptic. I don't believe it's the will of the people. I didn't believe it's the will of the people in the 24 election. And it's debatable how far it all goes back. 24, the midterms coming up now. But in relation to Epstein, I don't believe the will is what's driving this. So maybe you disagree. If not, why is it coming out now?
Well, I certainly don't believe in the political process either. Although I'm considering running for U.S. Senate, that's a separate conversation, which I'll talk about. But not because I believe in the political process, but I believe the political process can be used as leverage. But obviously, Thomas Massie has been driving this a lot. So it turns out that when you look at Trump's approval rating, Trump had talked about releasing the Epstein files before he got elected. In fact, the tune really changed. If you actually remember, he talked about the Kennedy file, all the stuff that he was going to release, he said he was going to do before the election. And then all of a sudden he gets elected. He releases some of the stuff. We get some of the JFK stuff. We get some of the other stuff. But then all of a sudden,
do you remember, let me cut you off for a second, Aaron. Do you remember like Pam Bondi's like, they're on my desk. I got to go through it tomorrow. Like it was like a big binder. And then you had these influencers with the white binders and they're standing there with their photo op. And it turned out they were empty. And then Trump was saying it was a hoax and people should move on. And
so Bondi said she had tens of thousands of hours of video to go through and all this other stuff. There's an undercover recording of her at a brunch talking about that. And then all of a sudden, there's no information. Then all of a sudden, Kash Patel and everybody else is saying, now there's no files, and Trump is saying that it's a hoax. By the way, how are people not calling for his resignation over this? Again, compare that to Watergate, right? I mean, this is unbelievable that this has gone on. But the bigger thing is that Trump started out promising to release these files and then ended up being the one suppressing the files. Now, of course, he's in the files. But the amazing thing about these files, and it keeps going and going and going, is you have Elon Musk. You know, he put out that tweet. Well, Trump's not going to release these files because he's in them. Elon Musk is in the files. Elon Musk is lying directly on X. He's sitting there saying, well, I never wanted to have anything to do with this. Epstein kept on asking me to go and I never went. The emails are of Elon begging to go to Epstein's Island. I'm not sure whether he went or not, but he was like, I want to make sure to come to the island and have a really great party. I don't want to have a tame party. There's all kinds of stuff. Like Elon is lying directly. And it's to the point where people are like, dude, is this you? And they're actually posting the email where he's making a statement. Oh, I didn't have anything to do with this. I rejected going on the island. It's like, here's this email. Here's this email. This is like the new PR playbook. It's like you mentioned Peter Attia. Everybody's like, well, I would deny that it happened, and then downplay it and then deflect. Even in light of evidence directly in front of people's face. We're at that level where the evidence is directly in front of people's. I'll give you another example of something that drove me nuts right away. So there was an email. So Epstein invested in this company, Blockstream, that I mentioned. Well, then there was an email from the founder of Blockstream to Epstein, basically saying, hey, listen, roughly, it looks like you have an investment in Ripple and Stellar. We don't think that it's a great idea for you to have dilute the investment. So we're thinking about cutting back your investment in Blockstream. So the XRP people take this email that says what I just described, and their version of it is that Epstein tried to hijack XRP. Looks like Epstein was an investor in Ripple. So people don't even use basic reading comprehension. I'm seeing people actually put emails out that in black and white say one thing and then write text describing the email that says something else, and people are buying the explanation and not reading the email. It's fascinating to watch this. And the whole crypto space is completely divided, and no one wants to be associated with it now. But you're seeing Reid Hoffman lying in real time. Oh, I didn't have any conversations with him after 2012. Multiple emails, 2015, 2006. It's just on and on and on. Everybody is actively lying. Everybody has the files. Everybody can see the information. It's publicly available. So to answer your question as to why now, I don't know. The thing is, it looks like we're about to bomb Iran. I saw on my feed that they're kind of like, hey, if you're an American in Iran, seek shelter, get the hell out. We're not going to help you. So, there's that meme of Epstein, they're going to blow up the world before you tell me who my friends are. But we're kind of we may be at that point. I'm kind of waiting for the big distraction to try to pull people away from this, because the more people get into this, the more people are going to learn how the world works. And there's no, once you do understand this, you understand that our system is over. I mean, it's completely captured.
Well, and the other thing is too is like, you know, so how do you explain then the drawdown in Bitcoin, the drop in value as quickly as it has occurred right now? Because wasn't it at 126,000? Was it October?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I was sitting there watching it yesterday, and I was texting back and forth with Jeffrey Tucker because we've been expecting this for quite some time. I think that once you understand that a big part of the Bitcoin being propped up was fake tether, and once you spend some time understanding how these exchanges work, most of these exchanges are fake. Most of these exchanges are, different. They're more stable coins than just tether. So you have Binance, you have all these other things. To the extent that most of this industry might be propped up by people printing fake coins, doing wash trading, buying coins from themselves to pump up the volume to make it look like there's more demand that there is than to get other people in. The whole thing is kind of shady. I mean, the whole crypto sector is actually kind of shady in that regard. And so what happens is, once you have an event and it starts to drop, well, there's a lot of leverage in the system. So there are a lot of people that are going long with leverage and so on and so forth. I actually saw yesterday, it sounds like this guy, Charles Hoskinson, who's the founder of the Cardano blockchain, I guess has lost $3 billion. He had a margin call. The Trump family had a margin call through World Liberty Financial. My understanding is they had to liquidate $5 or $10 million worth of Bitcoin. So what happens is this starts to cascade. And then there are margin calls, and then the price drops more. And then you get to the point where, and I have to, we should fact check if this actually turned out to be the delta here, but the price dropped so fast that it was costing Bitcoin miners $20,000 more to create Bitcoin than they're able to sell it on the market. Well, when that happens, because these Bitcoin miners have huge fixed costs, they have facilities, they have employees, they have energy. Then they have to sell the Bitcoin that they have just to pay their fixed costs. So that creates another spiral. So this is why there's fundamentally a bunch of volatility built into it, just based on people using leverage, shenanigans with stable coins propping things up, and then what happens with miners when there's a big price drop. But for me, the question is, again, who's going to buy? Who is the big buyer now that it's $1 trillion? I think they were waiting for some of this Clarity Act stuff. The Paul Atkins, the SEC chair, was saying, oh, well, maybe we'll open up 401ks to Bitcoin, the $12.5 trillion retirement market. And this is the other reason I want to educate the public on this, as opposed to engaging in debate with Bitcoin maxis. What I said, fraud and force. And I consider... Oh, this is where I lost my track. I was talking about the SEC and how the SEC locks out the average person from investing in startups. Well, they do that so that the insiders can invest early, make all of the money, and then they dump it on retail through 401ks and through financial advisors. So by the time Joe Schmo gets a chance to buy Bitcoin, it's already... So look, now investment funds are going to get an opportunity to buy Bitcoin when it's at a $1.5 trillion market cap. So the insiders get to make all of the money, and then they sell it to 401ks when it's a $1.5 trillion market cap. They're dumping on retail. So from my perspective, what's going on now, in order to keep up this store of value, they need governments buying people's Bitcoin through force. And they need basically registered financial advisors to dump on unsuspecting retail investors through financial vehicles. And I think the public needs to know that that's what's happening. And that's what they're trying to do. Anyway, they haven't done it yet, but that's what they're trying to do. Well, they've started with ETFs, but 401ks are a next level, where some schmuck won't even know it's in their portfolio. It's just an allocation. We're going to put 2% of your Bitcoin from your 401k in there, and guy's working, 40 hours a week, and he has a 401k through his company and doesn't even know the Bitcoin is in there. But he gets it at a $1.5 trillion market cap. But this is what maxis need. This is what is required to pump up the price, because there's no use of Bitcoin. People don't use it as a currency. The only value in it is if more people buy it. And so you have to create a lot of really creative stories once the price goes to where it has. And once you look at it and realize that in recent years, it hasn't performed relative to silver and gold. So it is truly a crisis for the Bitcoin maxis. And so they're going to result to pretty nasty tactics, which they have been doing to try to salvage themselves. Because again, think about it. If you're a Bitcoin maxi and you continue this story, and then let's say it fizzles out over the next few years, and it turns out you were sitting there trying to downplay the importance of Epstein's involvement, and you were there, initially claiming you were a liberty person, but then trying to push a Bitcoin strategic reserve and forcing the government to buy Bitcoin to pump your bags, you kind of have lost your entire reputation at that point. That's what's on the line for these people.
So they're trying to hang on for dear life.
They're trying to hang on for dear life, and they're trying to hang on to their money, and they're trying to hang on to their reputation. And we already know what they've done to get to this point. Right? I mean, think about it. Adam Back, you look at these people now, Adam Back, who is the CEO of Blockstream, sold and took on Epstein as an investor, took on the chair of the Bilderberg as an investor, took on traditional finance. I mean, these guys went out of their way to bring in all of the people that crypto was meant to disintermediate, and then, work through Epstein to cement the technical changes to the protocol to enable that to take place. I mean, these are people that have already sold out any sense of to the extent that they were positioning themselves as libertarians, they sold that out 9 years ago. Now it's just kind of like, if you think you're Bernie Madoff, well, you're in this far. What are you going to do? You just got to keep it going. You try to keep whatever story going on. But at some point, the party ends. And by the way, the longer the party goes on, the worse these people end up looking. So I'm not going to be very popular. But the only difference now is they're now engaging me. I was blocked before. I guess there's that Gandhi quote, what is it? First they laugh at you, then they ignore you, then they fight you, then you win. I don't even know if that was actually Gandhi, but but for the most part, we've gone through the first two stages, and now it looks like we're at the fight stage.
Might have been Rocky, Aaron. Maybe it was Rocky, not Gandhi.
Could have been Rocky. I don't know. I've seen a meme with Gandhi, but of course, I've also seen a meme of Abraham Lincoln saying, don't believe everything you see on the internet. So,
I do. I believe everything I see on the internet. The internet's undefeated, right? It never lies.
It never lies.
Well, so, okay. Now, here's where I'm a little confused with all this, because you've got Bitcoin crashing. You've got the maxis are, they're trying to hang on. They're trying to hang on. Now, the 401k aspect I find very interesting, because it's like every one of these funds, I've had people on talk about the municipality fraud that's going on, and how pensions and 401ks are tied into these municipalities. So regular people don't know that their pensions or your 401ks are invested in these municipalities that are committing fraud by inflating property values to increase property taxes so they can hit their budgets. I don't know how there's anything left in these 401ks.
I don't either. And when you look at the great taking and everything else, but it turns out when the bubble bursts, people don't actually own these things anyway. They're going to, in bankruptcy, your 401k is going to end up being owned by your bank, who's the secured creditor for your broker. People have no idea how any of this works. And it's so bad that when you try to tell people about it, you automatically look like a conspiracy theorist, because the presentation of the truth is so different than their indoctrinated reality that it's like, that can't possibly be true. I couldn't possibly have been lied to that much about the way the world works. That's the challenge with all of this. It's like, it's so bad but how do you, it's hard to ease people into it. And then you also don't even have a lot of time either. And so this is the challenge of this whole thing. But we're in a really interesting situation right now with Bitcoin dropping, but then with the Clarity Act, they are really pushing the Clarity Act. I mean, it fell apart, but then yesterday and today, the Treasury Secretaries, we've got to get this done. They are hyper accelerating getting this done. And I'm going to tell you, I think the reason why is they know that we're either about to have an economic collapse or they're going to bring on an economic collapse. This is why Trump brings on his new Fed chair, the guy that bailed out the banks in 2008, right? He didn't bring on a populist chair of the Federal Reserve, he brought in the guy that literally engineered the Bear Stearns bailout and the AIG bailout, who's part of the group of 30. Like, you couldn't have a more globalist insider guy in the Federal Reserve than this guy. But he's got really good experience bailing out the financial system in a crisis. So that's who we put in. That's his expertise.
Yeah, I was just seeing though, because Scott Bessent was on the Hill, but Judy Shelton was sitting right behind him. So now they're talking that Judy Shelton might be a last-minute replacement to be Fed chair.
I don't know. I haven't heard that. Is that
the poly marketer? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe whoever's handle I read it off of was saying that the poly market now the odds are increasing that she might end up becoming the Fed chair.
I have not heard. I thought the other guy pretty much had it locked. This guy Warsh, but maybe not. No, he is Trump's new Fed chair is Kevin Warsh. He is the new Fed chair.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I was way off, but I saw something about Judy Shelton yesterday because she was sitting right behind Bessent. So maybe she's going to be appointed to the Fed, the board of governors then, or something.
Maybe Kevin Warsh is the new Fed chair. So this is the guy. And I mean, I'm looking at this as okay. They're digitally tokenizing money. They're digitally tokenizing all of the rest of our assets. What that means is that in a financial crisis, it's going to be a lot easier for them to take control. And and then all of a sudden we wake up. It's like, oh, okay, well now you have UBI, but you've in exchange for all of your assets. I mean, this is the kind of infrastructure they need to put in place to be able to do something like that, and they've done it really quickly. I mean, again, people say to me, well, it would have been worse with Kamala. It would not have been worse with Kamala. We would have had a DEI squad that would have failed to implement any of this. And instead we've got Palantir, we have Musk, and we're capturing things that are already successful in the marketplace, like Tether and Circle, and putting those under the control of the government. That is a worse situation than some idiot on the left who has a social agenda trying to build it from scratch. That would actually just never get off the ground. That's truly, I think that's the case. This is amazing speed with which we've gotten digital ID. Real ID is digital in 12 states, and now the plan is for it to be completely rolled out to all 50 states digitally by 2027. And they've already started just this month charging $45 each leg of a flight if you don't have a real ID.
I think you can have your passport though too. I think your passport still gets you out of that fee, I believe. But
does it get you out of the fee?
I think it does.
I thought you still had the fee.
I could be wrong.
I guess I'll find out. I'm traveling next week and I don't have a real ID, but nevertheless, I mean, there was pushback on this for 20 years. The real ID passed in 2005. It took 20 years where states fought it and attorney generals, big battles, so on and so forth. And then Trump's in office and 120 days later, it's implemented. People are not paying attention to the level of digital tracking and surveillance that's happened. Much more in the last year than in the previous 4 or the previous 8. It's actually breathtaking. So, but I mean, look, the dollar's collapsed, all assets are in a bubble. The jobs numbers are looking horrible. I mean, I think most people realize we're kind of at the edge. People just don't know when that, when is it going to cross over? When's the collapse going to happen? But, we get close. Even things like a sharp drop down in the stock market and Bitcoin and everything else, all that stuff cascades. You never know how some hedge fund or some bank has over leverage or some kind of derivatives on some combination of things that they didn't think could happen. And then all of a sudden, we've got $100 trillion hole in the financial system. Our systems are very complex at this point, so much so it's hard to even manage risk. And so there are any of a number of things that could be the pinprick that pops the bubble. So, but I think they know that, which is why they're bringing in this guy as Fed chair. And it's why I think they're tokenizing money and assets. It is about control. There is no benefit to the American people with this legislation. The Clarity Act involves real-time tracking on financial transactions, on all financial transactions, all tokens. and the retention of records for 5 years, sharing that data with the Department of Justice, the Treasury, multiple federal government departments, and also the ability to share that information with foreign central banks. So people are sitting around like, we need clarity. If the clarity that they're offering is a digital prison, we really don't need clarity, right? I mean, having kind of the worst case scenario be the default, but at least it's clear, that's not really a compelling statement. I saw this Cynthia Loomis was actually talking to Treasury Secretary Bissett and said something like, well, we really need to have this legislation. And if you don't want to have the Clarity Act, move to El Salvador. She actually said that. So here's my question to you. So we're presenting this whole idea that these bills are going to make America the crypto capital of the world. Does money flow to where you have the strictest regulation? Is that how this works? Because I'm pretty sure in my study of economics that money tends to flow where there's the least regulation. So even the premise that we need to have these regulations and that will make us, our regulatory structure is not what is going to make us the crypto capital of the world. That is a profound lack of understanding of even what crypto is. It's so profoundly backwards. I almost don't have words for it.
Isn't there a goal to be to have less regulation so they could start reindustrializing in terms of, from a mining standpoint, being able to build these production facilities quicker so that, for example, like from a silver standpoint, because we have all the silver but no ability to mine it, and that's what China comes in. But isn't that what they're trying to do to eliminate some of this red tape?
I haven't paid attention to that aspect, but I've only paid attention to the tokenization of everything that we own. And by the way, that's not minimal, because what that means is this basically regulates how everything is bought and sold, not just money. So they're adding surveillance and regulation to commerce itself, to voluntary exchange. Now, might they be reducing legislation and regulation in other areas? Sure. I'm sure if the Trump family is looking at investing in a business, probably you'll find that that's where they're going to be looking to reduce the regulation. I'm not aware of any major, reduction or cutting in red tape. In fact, mostly what we've been getting, even this whole concept of Doge, has been disappointing, because people look at it as, well, this is about efficiency. And, I don't like government bureaucrats either. But when you replace them with AI, that actually doesn't turn out to benefit us. I mean, take for instance the IRS. You could say, well, we don't need all these IRS. We just fired 50% of the IRS agents. Okay, well, that's a start. But then we replace them with AI that can actually track all 16 million words of the tax code and automatically enforce it across the board with real-time tracking. Is that a win? Is that an increase in freedom or not? And unfortunately, technocrats actually want AI to be more involved in governance. So we're actually going to end up with more government. We're going to have fewer people. We're going to have more government and more enforcement. That is not a win. And a lot of people have confused, efficiency and liberty somehow with a lot of this. Doge was a disaster. Doge was an absolute disaster for freedom. All it did was connect Palantir to various federal government databases, which, by the way, is going to be tied into your real ID. That's not a win.
Yeah, I think the only good thing, though, is that the tax code is such a mess that nobody understands it. So at least as AI, no human can understand the tax code. You have the most expensive accountants in the world, and they don't even know what they're preparing, and the richest people in the world don't even know what they're signing. So that could benefit us. That the tax system is just such a mess, and nobody gets it. But to your point with Doge, I find it interesting when people are, they say Elon, some of the good things he's doing, and I'm not an expert on anything, but one conclusion that I've drawn is when you make billions of dollars and you're the richest man in the world on government subsidies, you're not a freedom of speech guy. I'm sorry. Like, the government is going to have some type of everything I'm sure he does is scripted and prepared.
Yep. Well, he's not a free speech guy. This speaks. I hope people are noticing this. So one thing that I found in studying the Genius Act and the Clarity Act is I was looking at posts in my feed, and I'm like, there'll be a post about the Genius Act, and there'll be like 2,500 likes. And like the post has all this traffic, and I'm like, so are you telling me that there's mass support in the public for adding regulation and surveillance to digital money? Is this a real thing? So then I dug into it, which is part of the article that I have coming out. What I found is that most of the crypto media, if you think legacy media is bad, the crypto media shouldn't even be called media. They're all sponsored ads. There's absolutely no objective journalism. So you take the top crypto publication, and there were 33 articles for the Genius Act, 0 against. And then you find out that the parent company of the publication benefits from the Genius Act. And so I went through, and I actually have it in the article. Here are the specific people who funds it. Well, then I'm like, well, where does this traffic come from? Well, it turns out right after the Genius Act was launched, there were 100,000 accounts created instantly. And so basically the traffic is all fake. So it's fake media and fake bots. There's no actual, it's manufactured social proof. There aren't actually people out there that aren't lobbyists, that aren't being paid, and that aren't bots that are excited about this legislation. The truth of the matter is most people don't know what the legislation is, and most people have not heard of it. It's not that they're against it. It's that most people haven't heard of it. Well, so much of this is fake. Well, I even think with Elon, all of these posts where it's like he's dressed up as Iron Man, or he's depicted as some kind of superhero, and then there's Doge designer or whatever, like a half a dozen different accounts that are like fanboy accounts that always get boosted and everything else. And I'm like, do people really have this hero worship or not? Or is that also all fake? Because Musk has lied explicitly. He lied about this Epstein stuff. When the whole thing with OpenAI came out, he was trying to say, well, I was really worried about AI and I was losing sleep over it. So I decided, well, I'm going to get involved, and we're going to do it as open source because that's the safest way to make sure that we don't get wiped out by AI. Well, what came out of the discovery was he was trying to take OpenAI for himself and fold it into Tesla. He wasn't out there trying to make this open source to save the world. That came out of discovery. Then he comes out and says, I bought X to save free speech. There's the video of him sitting with 2 or 3 of his employees around a conference room table saying, I bought this to basically rip off WeChat, which is the everything app in China, where people do their banking, social media, payments, the whole 9 yards. He said explicitly, yeah, I bought it to rip that off. So do people really believe? And I know some people did believe it, but are people still believing that he's here to save humanity with open source AI, to save free speech, and that he wasn't trying to get on Epstein's island? Are people believing it? Or is even the traffic itself online and the presentation that it looks like people believe him, but maybe all that's fake too?
Yeah, I'm smirking because of the superhero reference that you just said, because I've been saying, I'm repeating myself here, but this is not a superhero movie, but yet people still believe that we're in this, and the good guys, bad guys, I want to win. This is never going to end. Like, this will go on after you and I. Like, this is not the fourth quarter of a football game, and but yeah, people they have that wishful thinking, quoting a friend, that it is all going to be a happy ending. But yeah, you said the superhero thing is just kind of funny to me.
Well, have you seen this? Have you seen this event? This Avenger thing? They actually did this before the election. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., J.D. Vance, they've actually called it the Avengers and dressed these people up. I'm like, think about how big of a psyop it is to go from this guy was Operation Warp Speed and added $7.5 trillion to the debt in one term, more than any other president. That's still the record until he beats it this time around. To go from that to the only man who can save Western civilization is that guy. What an amazing amount, like how much propaganda. Yeah, it does make you almost think that even bringing in Biden and everything, that all that was contrived, because to get to a point where people thought this guy was going to be leading the Avengers, it is nonsensical.
Well, have you seen what's going around now with the city of London and how this is all, you're seeing all this, right?
Which
Promethean Action, Susan Kokinda, and how Trump and Besson went to Davos to lay terms of surrender, and that he's behind the scenes.
I haven't actually. That hasn't crossed my radar. actually.
Don't you even see any of that?
No, is that a real? Is that getting momentum?
Oh, it's all over my feed. I'm surprised it's not on your feed.
I haven't seen
That
it.
the Epstein list was about Lord. Oh God, I never heard of the guy, British guy, and that Minneapolis was a color revolution arranged by architects that were part of the city of London. And I'm just, again, I don't know anything, but I'm like, why would the city of London care about Minneapolis? Like, what would they care? Like,
Yep.
Lord,
well, I've heard about the color revolution claims, but I didn't know that was tied. I haven't heard the association with the city of London in this one. So
Lord, the Epstein list is about Lord. Now I can't. I'm not blanking out his name.
Starts with an M. I have seen that guy. Starts with an M. There's a picture of. Yes, I did see that. But I didn't see that tied into the whole city of London thing. But
that's where I'm trying to look it up while I'm talking to you really quick. Lord Mandelson.
Mandelson
was leaking bank secrets to Epstein while he was in jail. Now Trump is dismantling the whole system.
How is Trump? How does that relate to Trump dismantling the system?
But there's a whole video about it, and you have to be a subscriber apparently, Aaron.
Okay.
But this is the kind of stuff. And look, I'm not an absolutist. Like, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is exactly what it all was, or how it's all going to play out. But it's just some of this stuff to me is like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like Venezuela was somehow tied into a city of London. What would city of London have to do with Venezuela? I don't understand any of that.
You just have to trust the plan. You're not trusting the plan, and that's the issue here. I have this is a theory, so I will state that this is a theory. But after reading some of the Epstein files, I'm convinced that Steve Bannon is somehow involved with QAnon. That guy is. I mean, again, this is a guy who's brought in professionally to rehab Epstein's identity and to consult. And they put together this, video. I think it was 16 hours or something of video footage. Some of it's released. Like, there's a couple of hours of it, high def. And you're seeing the notes back and forth. And it's like, yeah, we need to get rid of you're a convicted pedophile, and we need to morph you into being a philanthropist. And then there's an email in there about how they were able to fix Epstein's Wikipedia page and remove any references to the conviction. And then they were able to find the IP addresses of the people that were trying to edit back them in and have them blocked and banned from Wikipedia. You have Ghislaine Maxwell having huge influence over the content and structure of Reddit. You have Epstein being tied to the guy behind 4chan, but Steve Bannon presents himself as this populist, and he is absolutely not. He's an investment banker. He's sitting out there trying, so I think he's engineered this fake populism, and this is why I think he might be part of this Q thing, because he's also tied into crypto. And so, again, this is just speculation, but I've thought this for a while because I did a podcast on this. There's a whole thing that goes on. I don't know if you've seen this with the XRP and XLM communities. And there's going to be a great reset. There's going to be a debt jubilee. All of your debt is going to be wiped out. And they're going to recreate the monetary system, and you're going to end up with tokenized gold, and that tokenized gold is going to be only on XLM and XRP. This is a massive, it is a QAnon level psyop. And I did a podcast on it, and I looked at the QAnon movement, and I looked at this Jassara Nassara thing, which is a conspiracy theory that started where the claim was that the day before 9/11, Congress was going to meet and they were going to do this debt jubilee, but that 9/11 was manufactured to stop the debt jubilee. This is where this conspiracy theory starts. And then that it then ends up linking into this whole thing with XRP and XLM. Well, of course, none of it's happened, but it's actually it's heartbreaking to look at this, because I found on Rumble, there are some people, a lot of these are like religious people, or it's like some pastor, somebody who makes himself look to be a pastor, and he's on there saying, yeah, there's going to be a debt jubilee. And so in the comments, there are a lot of like elderly women that are like, oh, good, I'm going to stop paying my mortgage. There's a whole history of people that have been kicked out of their house because then what they'll do is they'll move the goalpost, just like with Trust the Planet. It's like, well, the debt jubilee is going to be tomorrow. There's one woman who had some online publication who kept on claiming this 1,000 times. She said, this Jassar and Nassar is going to happen. Was never right. And people were losing their homes over this. Then another part of it is there are med beds coming where you're just going to be able to sit in the med bed and it's going to actually cure all of your diseases, cure your cancer. So there are people that were not getting medical treatment because they were promised, linked into this entire scheme. I'm telling you, it's pretty sophisticated. The way that they're able to keep these things going and then make them more outlandish over time. So when the thing that you made up doesn't happen, you make up some bigger, more outlandish thing, and people seem to be more willing to keep believing that next big thing is going to happen than believe that they were duped the 1,000 times they were told the other thing that didn't happen. I got angry actually putting together the materials for the podcast because I would see the comments. People are still believing this stuff 10, 15 years later.
Yeah, the whole idea like there's going to be a military coup. I mean, and I never read Q, but I was around enough people in 2020, and I didn't know. I mean, if I'd have recorded this back then talking about this stuff, I would have thought, again, because I didn't know anything, like, oh, the military is going to come in, flip the light switch, and Trump would remain in office. But there are still people that believe that there's going to be some type of military coup and get rid of all the bad people. And I'm like, well, wasn't that what Q was about before?
Well, the most dangerous thing about that, so fortunately it's fake and it's not going to happen. But the worst part is that they've actually managed to create propaganda where there are people rooting for the suspension of the Constitution and for martial law. That's the actual scary part, is that there are people rooting for this. People should be fundamentally appalled by this concept. Oh, we're going to shut we have white hats in the military. They're going to come in, shut off the Constitution. They're going to, the story is, right, they're going to round up all the pedophiles and they're going to have military tribunals. And then one other aspect of it is then they're going to execute them on closed caption TV or something like this. Like, it's a really stupid story, but people actually believe it. And the fact that people cheer for it is the worst part of it all.
Well, the whole you say that people were calling for the Insurrection Act to occur in Minneapolis, right? They wanted to send the military in there, and alt-right media, quote unquote alt-right media, with big audiences were like, call it in, and but also I don't, I've been saying this now for a little while in terms of like where we're at with all this stuff, and I don't know. I mean, will it materialize to this point, right? Like, if they want to get the Clarity Act through, they're going to get it through, don't you think, Aaron? I mean, how can you stop it?
So I don't think so. The way that the Clarity Act will not happen is one of two things. If the banking lobby and the crypto lobby can't come to an agreement for how they're going to carve up, our financial freedom and the interest on these financial products, then that will stop it. So I think what's going on now is, the only thing that stops it is a debate between, and when I say the crypto industry, it's not even the crypto industry. It's like 3 crypto firms versus the banking lobby. There's $100 million so far invested in this lobbying effort. But I think this Epstein thing could derail it if enough of what's in the Epstein thing gets out. Because to a certain degree, it's kind of like, again, if you're trying to push, we're going to be the crypto capital, we're going to use 401ks, when the whole thing is dumping and now people think that Epstein was associated with it, there's no political capital in that. There's nothing but downside at this point. Trump only got involved and people only got involved because it looked like there was money in it and there was momentum. If the momentum goes away and now you have the taint of Epstein, what's the win for a politician?
What is? I think we talked about this last time. What is Tether's connection with Rumble?
Tether has made a huge investment in Rumble, so they're a shareholder now. They invested a pretty large amount, and I think people are going to be able to get tipped in Tether or something. That might be another part of it. But the funny thing about Rumble is it's just Rumble already has as investors J.D. Vance, Vivek Ramaswamy, the entire thing. I actually had a podcast, a guest that comes on my show from time to time named Craig Wenkowitz, who I met Craig because I was on his show, World HD on Rumble. And he ended up getting had a dispute with the person running, but he was telling me the whole thing is pay to play. He said Rumble is all pay to play. This is another one of these things that positions itself as a free speech platform, but the names and the shows that show up on the front page, none of that's organic. That's all pay to play. And on top of that, I think Rumble's in a lawsuit for basically inflating the viewer numbers. I don't know. It's probably a very small fraction of what they report. But Dan Bongino, I believe Dan Bongino is also an investor in this. And for me, I did a podcast on this whole kind of new media thing. Because it was under this whole banner of people now thinking that we have free speech, in part because of the Elon Musk thing and everything else. We have the illusion of free speech, but when you dig into who owns these platforms, think about if it were the other way around. If the former assistant director of the FBI and Joe Biden and Barack Obama were investors in a media platform that they were calling it a free speech platform, would people think that's a free speech platform? Right. I mean, you actually had Dan Bongino. You actually have J.D. Vance. You have people that are sitting in government or involved with law enforcement as large shareholders in a platform, and the content is pay to play. Is that a free speech platform? And I'm not even saying I don't even like the government regulation thing, but you talk about the 230 and everything else. Is it a free speech platform or is it an editorial platform? Not that I, want to even go into that, but these aren't actually free speech. If you think Rumble's a free speech platform, you don't understand how it works. And X, the way that, the irony of this is it's the most viral post I've ever had. I did an analysis of the new terms of service of X. It says that X owns all of your content. It says X can share your information, including your DMs, with law enforcement at their discretion. It says that if you try to reverse engineer or figure out how their algorithms work, including trying to figure out how censorship works, it's an automatic violation of the terms of service. And if you have a dispute, there's like one court in Texas that you can go to, and your maximum damages are like $100 or $200. So is that a free speech platform? Is that in line with the way that his image has been bolstered? I created that Own Nothing site that I have. Originally, it started out as being a way for people to post a link to these click wrap agreements and have it give them a score for what rights they've given up and explain what it means in human terms. And actually, some of my most popular posts, I did one yesterday where I took the Bitcoin ETF, the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, and analyzed the terms. Like, hey, did you know that there's nothing backing if they get hacked? Or somebody steals the coins, you have almost no protection. It's not FDIC insured. They have in there as risk factors that they may create more than 21 million Bitcoin. They have in there that it could be confiscated. If you thought what FDR did in 1933 or whatever it was bad, it's even easier to do with a BlackRock ETF. You read through this, it's like, why would anybody buy a BlackRock ETF? And then so I was going to create a whole website about that where you could take all of the agreements, you could just paste them in there, and it would tell you basically that you own nothing. But instead of doing that, I just periodically will take a contract. Here's what you don't own the money in your bank. They can cancel your contract, whatever. Just continue to do those things, and they're very popular. But it's eye opening because I think if people really understood what they've already signed away, they'd realize that they already own nothing. And if you realize you already own nothing, then you'd realize you have nothing to lose, and you would stop complying with these systems and start building parallel alternatives. That's kind of where I think we're at. That's where we need to be, because yes, they will certainly try to pass it if they can. I will tell you the thing that's more bothersome to me. When I was explaining to people how we might get a CBDC before the 2024 election, I would say that, well, we'll get it the way we normally get these things, in an emergency. That's how we got the Patriot Act. That's how we got the CARES Act. That's how we got TARP. Usually we get this kind of like big surveillance thing in an emergency. They're passing Genius and Clarity there's no emergency. These are the Clarity is probably actually in reality the largest surveillance bill we've ever passed, and there's no opposition to it. I'm like one of the rare people. I went on a crypto podcast. This show, Paul Barron, I didn't even know who the guy was. He has 2.2 million followers, and I don't think he knew who I was. And so he was asking me, well, the question was like, do you like the bill that's coming out of the Agriculture Committee or the Finance Committee? I'm like, we should have none of these bills. We should repeal the Bank Secrecy Act. And I just went through and did my whole thing. And the comments were like 99% positive. Like, this is the only guy telling the truth. This is the only guy you should have on this show. And I'm saying that because people have never been, it's not that what I did was a great performance. People have never heard an opposing side on these different crypto channels that are all scripted. And people inherently know it's BS, but they don't know the details of why it's BS. And so if you explain it to them, I think it resonates with them that, yeah, these bills are horrible. It's about surveillance. There's no upside for us. This is about benefiting banks and 2 or 3 crypto firms. Why are we trying to convince ourselves as to which version of which type of handcuffs we're going to like the best? It's ridiculous.
So now you're talking to as many people as you can to get this message out, and then after March or in March, you'll be open to some joint conversations.
Yeah, I mean, in March I'll be open to some joint conversations, and there'll be more. And it depends, by the way. Watch this: if the Bitcoin price rallies, then no one's going to talk to me again. Watch what happens. If it literally, that's exactly what's going to happen, because these people would not talk to me. There's only one guy, and I want to give him credit. Cedric Yunkelman, I believe is his name. He has a podcast called Bitcoin Matrix. Do you know him?
I know of him, but I don't know him.
He's the
Dave goes on there. Dave goes on his show.
Right, that might be how I was introduced, but it's the only Bitcoin maxi ever who's had me on his show. And so I'm very appreciative of him, and he was actually very respectful, and we had a great conversation. So I want to state it is possible. It's happened one time since 2017.
Do you see this thing turning around quickly, or how do you see it playing out?
Which thing? Bitcoin?
Yeah.
I all of this stuff is manipulated. So I guess the question is, if it turns around, then who's doing the manipulation? It would require manipulation because, again, at this market cap, it requires real volume, and I don't see buyers. Who are the buyers? Boomers don't like Bitcoin. And it looks like the Bitcoin strategic reserve isn't happening. It looks like they're not going to buy. In fact, Besant said that, we can't bail out Bitcoin. He was actually asked that in a hearing, but I don't think the plan for the government to buy $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin is going through. And by the way, it's a really hard sell. I mean, Cynthia Loomis is like, hey, we're going to buy $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin and hold it for 20 years. And then that's how we're going to pay off our national debt. No one's going to believe that when it just lost 50% of its value in a short period of time. You can't sell that. You could sell it if you were if it was on the upturn and it passed $100,000 for the first time and it hit new records, and you've got all of these like crypto bros like the Winklevoss twins throwing $100 million into these super PACs. If you've got that kind of momentum, maybe you can pull it off. How are you going to sell that now? How are you going to sell that to people today when most people are pretty skeptical of it? So then if you don't have the government buying $1 trillion of it, and there's no retail appetite, where's the demand? Where's the liquidity going to come from to buy this? And it's pretty clear based on what's going on in the precious metals market that as much as maxis would like to think, one of the stories became, well, the rise up in gold and silver was, is just there that'll all circle back into or circulate into Bitcoin. It didn't happen. So now there's a genuine question: where are we gonna get the demand for this? And I honestly couldn't tell you where you're gonna get the demand at this point. It might go up some, but I don't see it certainly hitting its all-time high anytime. It's not going to hit the $200,000 mark that Max Kaiser's been talking about since 2019, and Tommy Lee and everybody. It's always 200,000 too, by the way, or 220,000. Max Kaiser's been saying. The way he says it, $220,000 is in play this year for the last 7 years.
Yeah, and I was referencing my conversation yesterday. He didn't get the movie reference. You probably will. Boiler Room. Remember when Giovanni Ribisi was cold calling, and then the guy, he answers the phone. He ends up buying some stock, and he buys some more stock, and all of a sudden he's leveraged, and he's about to lose everything. And the wife, didn't understand, and yada yada yada. And in the end, he was able to get his initial investment back. But I don't know why I have that scene like playing out in my head right now, because you have people that bought at the top, didn't know any better. Yeah, I mean, how many young people? I've met so many young people. They love Bitcoin, and I don't know, maybe because they think they're swinging for the fences, fast track
No,
to make money.
no, I know why. Because it's not their fault. If you watch these Bitcoin Maxi podcasts, it's pure propaganda. Somebody actually sent me, because I hadn't watched one for a long time. I mean, it's gotten to the point where, a friend of mine sent me a link to one, and it's like two guys talking about how excited they are that MicroStrategy or strategy might get added to the S&P 500, so that will mean that it automatically gets put in people's investment funds. There's a whole podcast. That's all that they're talking about. So I don't blame, again, it's tough on this, because sometimes I come off as a little bit, sharp on social media, but it's because for 8 years, the truth has been suppressed. People have been imprisoned for trying to get this information out. And there are some really bad people involved in the government that are trying to suppress this for their own personal self-interest. And so then all of a sudden, when you get traction, everybody's like, whoa, you should talk to me about the truth. The people that have been suppressing the dialogue for 9 years. No, sorry, no one owes you a debate. Do you know that Roger Vere's friend offered Adam Back $500,000 to debate hijacking Bitcoin after the book came out, and Adam Back rejected it? That is the level of suppression. So now people want to debate. Well, okay, good. We'll talk in March, but in the meantime, people need to be warned about the Clarity Act. People need to be warned about Tether. Tether is an absolute disaster. By the way, they took a stablecoin that wasn't backed and then parlayed that into a government-regulated stablecoin that the U.S. Commerce Secretary's firm backs, that still hasn't done an audit. And then they've taken those tokens that still haven't passed an audit and bought actual gold. I think they bought like 24 tons of gold or something like that. They're buying land. They're taking a presumably manufactured fake token that's supposed to be backed by fake fiat, and they're using it to buy hard assets. Wow. How's that going to go? And by the way, and I warn people about this, now they're going to be too big to fail, because when you read the story about this and who was involved, it's so bad that you'd be in disbelief. No way. Those guys with that background started this thing, and it never passed an audit, and it got to the point where Trump's crypto advisor became the CEO and Howard Lutnick's firm backed it. And now when they put out the USAT, which is the US Tether thing, the video looks like it looks like Pete Hegseth put it together. It looks like a Department of War propaganda film. I'm not even kidding. They wrapped this thing up completely in the flag, and it's probably one of the biggest scams in financial history. And now I think it's too big to fail. Now I think they'd bail it out rather than let people know what an audit would show.
Yeah, I think of two instances where, it made me aware regular people never benefit, always pay the price. Well, three instances. One's another movie reference, The Big Short, when Steve Carell is at the end on the stage and saying, regular people are going to have to pay for it. But 2008, nobody suffered, very minimal amount of people, none of the big players suffered any consequences for any of that. Nobody was brought on charges.
One guy went to jail, they had it at the end of that movie.
Well, Bernie Madoff, and then who was the other? Was it?
Well, that wasn't at that time. They were talking about Madoff. Was that even really related to that time period? I'm trying. Well,
either way, but yeah, I mean that was the name I thought of. But other than that, Jamie Dimon's still in his position. I mean, still to this day. Yeah, and also the Robin Hood. right? With GameStop when they did the kill switch on the trading on that. Because they had it on. They were teetering, and all of a sudden, no more buy, only sell.
Yep.
That should have told people, regular people have no seat at this table.
I remember when that happened because I was online tweeting about tokenization. I was talking about this other blockchain called Ravencoin before I realized we actually need privacy tokens, which is why I prefer Zano now. But when that whole thing was going on, I'm like, if you actually had shares traded on the blockchain, you wouldn't have naked short selling. You wouldn't have had all of the scams that were going on with GameStop and with, what was the other one? AMC. I think AMC was the other one. And so I was tweeting a lot during that time. We fixed none of that. You're right. The average guy got completely screwed. And now Robinhood's getting into tokenization, but it's not going to be the kind of tokenization that's transparent. It's this bad kind of tokenization. And who's he backed by? Citadel, or I can't even remember which one Robinhood is backed by. They were front running all the but that's how the system works. The system is already rigged, and now they're going to add digital surveillance on top of that broken system. It's a horrible idea. It's going completely the wrong way. We should be getting rid of the SEC. We should be getting rid of bank secrecy laws. And by the way, the bank secrecy laws cost $61 billion a year to comply with the bank secrecy laws. All of the paperwork and all of the biometric screening, and every time you fill out a form and all those, it's $61 billion a year. And they catch less than 0.1% of the actual crime. It doesn't solve money laundering at all. I have a stat here. I think it was Wells Fargo or Wachovia. One of them was, I should probably get that right. I'll pop it up. It's in my article. But one of these big banks was found to have been involved in $800 billion worth of money laundering for cartels. No one went to jail.
But according to some, Aaron, the city of London, Trump is destroying the elites and and restoring sovereignty back to, or destroying the elites and restoring sovereignty back to the people.
This is why I think it's like this is why I think Steve Bannon has got to be involved in this. There's a construction of a narrative here where it's like he's a smart guy and he knows how to do this kind of manipulation, which is why he gets brought in to help people like Jeffrey Epstein. In order to get people to believe that, there is nothing. Whitney Webb's done a lot of good work on this. When you study Trump's history and his tie, he was influenced by Ray Cohn, who was a lawyer that worked with the mafia and was involved in sex blackmail. Like the whole thing is, there's no aspect of Trump's background that would lead you to believe that he's principled or ethical. There's no part of his skill set that that's not how he's learned to be successful in the world. It's just literally not part of his background. So to go from that to trust the plan and he's going to defeat the city of London and everything else, there's zero basis to believe that. That is such a construction that but it's a construction that somebody had to do. Like you'd have to be, or somebody's just giggling saying, I wonder if they'll buy this. And then when they keep buying it, it's like, well, what if they'll buy this next? Because it's ridiculous. I mean, this guy's, by the way, you know that 25% of the entire debt of the United States has happened under Trump's 5 years as president?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, $10 trillion. One guy, 5 years.
It doesn't even matter anymore, the number. It doesn't even probably, it's irrelevant.
It doesn't matter, but just like, then there are people that'll tell me that's like, well, Republicans are fiscally conservative. It's like, how would you, and what basis do you believe that? It's all ridiculous. My wife's telling me I have 10 minutes.
Oh, well, we were towards the end anyway, so it's fine. I don't want to get you in trouble. Happy wife, happy life. Where can people find you?
People can find me you can find me at daylightfreedom.org. That links to the other kind of 5 sites that we have. And you can find me on X at Aaron R. Day.
Aaron, as always, I enjoy our conversations, and maybe we need to do another one with you and Colin. You have to set aside your whole afternoon for that, but because Dave, you can't do an hour with Dave. That's just impossible.
Yeah, no, I enjoy. And by the way, there's so much has happened since the last time we were on. I mean, I don't even remember what all we were talking about, but this is like before gold was $5,000. Like, there's so much to talk about. Yeah, I'll let me know. I'll block off a Friday at some point.
Well, remember our first conversation was right after he had his Tucker appearance, and he was getting, hammered by Mark Levin, Ted Cruz, on and on and on. That was the first conversation he had on recording after the whole Tucker fallout.
That's right. That's right. Well, by the way, after the Epstein files, how's that go? I haven't heard from Mark Levin. What's going on with? How's that going now? Ted Cruz? I think Ted Cruz was trying to claim that Epstein was associated with Russia. Ben Shapiro was trying to tie Epstein to North Korea. I mean, at this point, you can't really make that argument when you look at this information. I don't know what these guys, I don't know how they're going to spin this.
As Laura Loomer, I haven't seen her comment on this at all either, I don't think.
No. How about that?
Yeah, interesting how, how things. I was just talking about Daily Wire. I know you got to go, but I was talking about the Daily Wire, man. At one point, and maybe this is my own view and I'm wrong, they were like a juggernaut, right? Like, he brought Jordan Peterson in, then he brought Candace Owens in, and then Matt Walsh was a rising star, and Michael Knowles, and first of all, Jordan Peterson, that guy hasn't been in public in 6 months, I think.
Nope.
And my understanding is, I mean, I'm in Phoenix. He lives in Phoenix or Scottsdale. Some health-related issues or what. Candace Owens is off doing her own thing. And, Daily Wire, they were proven to be, they said they were something that they're not, right?
Yep.
And they're not the juggernaut. Turning Point, I got an argument with a friend of mine about this yesterday. Turning Point, to me, has been completely neutralized. They lost their leader. I mean, and people are just not buying her story. You can get into the whole, whatever, but they're just not buying her.
No, they're not. They're not at all. I mean, the stuff that I see, I haven't followed it at all, but the stuff that I see about her is just like, and I don't know if any of it's true. It's like, oh, well, she didn't get anything in the will because she cheated. I don't know if any of this is true. I have no idea about any of it, but all I know is everything that I see is just incredibly negative.
And you look at her, it's just not, and I'm not even talking about her physical appearance. He built that thing.
Yeah.
She can't just step in and just carry it on. And there's nobody to replace. There's nobody to carry the mantle, to pick up the, carry the torch.
No way. No, that was all him.
Aaron, I look forward to the next conversation, and thanks for coming back on.
Yep, thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
Mic drop.
Bye.